Now, what we're doing with this series is thinking about how we can use the rhythms in our everyday lives to be missionaries for Jesus. That might mean changing how we use these rhythms in little ways, but so that it's more engaging for the culture around us. This rhythm is the rhythm of eating. Eating is something that we have to do. We have to do it to survive. But isn't it interesting that we don't just plug in, we don't just fill up and recharge. The very thing that sustains us, the very thing we need to do to survive is also something that we enjoy. It engages all of our senses in one bite, 5 senses in a pleasurable way. But there's more than that. People connect over food. At a meal, there are laughs had, there are jokes cracked, there are tears shed, there are stories told, and sometimes there's awkwardness experienced, but even then, sometimes that's a good thing. Now, biblically, the Bible is bookended with a meal. In the garden, Adam and Eve have crops and plants to eat, and in Revelation, when Jesus comes back, there'll be a banquet, a wedding feast. And in the middle of that, in the Old Testament, the Jewish culture was centered around eating, centered around feasts. And that continued through to the New Testament, but then Jesus comes. And Jesus comes eating and drinking, Luke's Gospel tells us. So much so that he was considered a drunkard and a glutton. And he was accused as the friend of sinners. But why was that? It was because he ate with them. God clearly cares about eating. Now, we live in a very different culture to then, but we still center around meals. On average, we have 21 meals a week. That's 3 a day: breakfast, lunch, dinner. And there are also so many cafes, so many restaurants all around us. So what we want to be thinking about is, how can we be missional as we do this in our everyday lives? How can we use this rhythm to shine and show the glory of Jesus in the midst of eating? I personally have been the recipient of so many forms of hospitality. I was first taught about Jesus by a really good friend who faithfully pursued me and genuinely answered questions, but it was always in the context of a meal. We had multiple breakfasts a week together. I also learned how to pray as people shared grace at dinner tables. And so in all of that, I realized that God comes in even to the mundane things of life, even as we share meals together. So 2 practical things to take away as we think about the rhythm of eating and being missionaries in Christ. Firstly, what margins can we make? If we have 21 meals a week, 3 a day, what ones can we share with other people? Those inside the church, but also those that God has put in our lives outside of the church that don't yet know Him. And secondly, what are some ways that we can remind ourselves and each other about the goodness of God in the midst of a meal? That might mean thinking about ways that we can say grace. That might mean thinking of stories we can tell, or questions we can ask, or ways we can love and listen to others. And are you prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have in the craziness or in the peacefulness of the dinner table?